Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So welcome for this press conference we're hosted for Project 2049 Institute, welcoming their visit to Taiwan. We've been long waiting for their arrival. The delegation is led by their president, the Honorable Randy Shriver. He is the chairman of the Project 2049 Institute and also former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs. We all know him. He's a good friend of Taiwan, and also he's here with his delegation. Also together with me, another good friend of Taiwan, we have Mr. Dan Blumenthal. He's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. And so he is also coming back to Taiwan. And so we're very, very happy to have them both with me sitting here. I'll be inviting them to speak shortly. And before that, I would like to acknowledge the presence of also so many good friends here in the delegation and also here with us. We have also Ms. Carrie Bingham, Director of the Aerospace Security Project at the Center for Strategic and International Security, CSIS, here with us. We have Dr. Colin Francis Jackson. He's chairman of the Strategic and Operational Research Department at the U.S. Naval War College. We have Mr. Yang Easton. He's senior director at the Project 2049 Institute. We have Ms. Jenny Huang. She's senior director at the Project 2049 Institute. And Mr. Eric Lee, associate director of programs at the Project 2049. And besides so many others, good friends of the delegation. And also we have here from North American Department, we have Lin Meichen, 专门委员. She's Assistant Director General of the Department of North American Affairs. 林美成专门委员，我们的北美司的. So having introduced all our guests here on the stage, also the audience, right now it's my honor to invite Randy to address the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. It's wonderful to be back in Taiwan, and it's my privilege to lead a delegation on behalf of our institute with the folks that you kindly introduced. Our mission here is to renew contacts. It's been, in my case, 2.5 years since my last visit to Taiwan. So to reestablish contact and have a chance to exchange views with officials here. But it's also not lost on us that we visit during a very critical time. Coinciding with our visit, we saw more PLA activity in an attempt to intimidate and coerce the people of Taiwan. We see a lot of Taiwanese enthusiasm to respond to that kind of pressure, enthusiasm that takes the shape of not only the military response, but interest on the part of civil society to contribute and be prepared and to think about resilience. So it's an important time to be here for us to learn from our friends in Taiwan what their priorities are, not only how they're responding in the here and now, but what they think they need in our partnership and our relationship. So our goal is to not only absorb and be educated, but also to return to Washington and other places and be good advocates for this relationship and be able to talk in an informed way about what this relationship needs from the U.S. side of the ledger in terms of policies, in terms of what our Congress might be looking at in the coming year, in terms of what the executive branch may do with respect to military relations. So again, we want to be informed advocates for this relationship. And so far during this visit, I think we've had excellent exchanges and we're better positioned, we're better for it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Randy, it's wonderful to have you back, and also our sincere thanks for your support to Taiwan over the years. We definitely need translation for this important words. Thank you, Sophie.
所以大家早安，真的非常高兴这一次可以回到台湾，率领我们2049计划研究所的这个访团。那我们这一次回到台湾的目的，主要是希望可以重新进行对话。因为我个人的话，我上一次访台其实是2.5个半年前的事情了，所以我们这一次也跟非常多台方的官员还有这个领袖来进行意见交换。那我们现在确实是一个非常关键的时刻，即使是今天这周，我们都看到解放军也在台湾周遭的这个区域进行相关的活动，增加对台湾人民的压力以及胁迫的行为。但是我们也看到台湾以非常负责任的方式来回应这些压力，不管是在军事上还是我们公民社会 会，我们都看到大家准备好做出贡献，以及做更多的准备来建立韧性。所以我认为我们这一次来到这边访问是非常重要的事情。我们希望可以进行相关的学习，以及跟我们的友人去进行讨论，了解台湾正在做哪一些准备，还有需要我们伙伴什么样的协助。所以我们这一次学习到更多的知识之后，我们回到华府的时候，也更能为台湾、为台美关系发声，去了解台湾这边需要美国提供什么样的帮助，不管是政策面，还是这个国会明年的一些讨论的方向，或是行政团队在进行更多的军事合作的这个方面。所以我们目前为止，我们的访问都非常的顺利，进行了许多非常好的对话，所以很高兴来到这里，谢谢。
Thank you, Sophie. Also here acknowledging the presence of another good friend, Dan Blumenthal. Thank you. Okay, now with the permission right now, we open the floor for questions. So any questions from our reporter friends? 有没有提问? Oh, yes. Okay, from Xiaoqiao Zhou from CNA.
Thank you. Welcome, Chairman, to Taiwan again. I'm Joseph from Taiwan Central News Agency. So my question is that a recently released CSIS war game simulation on the Chinese invasion of Taiwan has come to the conclusion that, unlike Ukraine, once a cross-strait war breaks out, it is impossible to U.S. and other allies to get any troops or supplies to Taiwan. So they suggested that whatever weapon Taiwan needs to defend itself, U.S. have to send it before the war begins. So in your opinion, and with your experience in Pentagon, is there any way that the U.S. government could do to speed up the delivery of weapon system or required weapon to Taiwan? In particular, now we're already seeing a backlog due to the Ukraine war. Thank you.
We allowed translation for the question, so we understand. Sophie.
所以我的问题就是，我们最近看到这个美国的华府智库战略暨国际研究中心这个 CSIS， 他们最近进行了这个战争的兵推。那他们的结论是，不像乌克兰战争，如果台海发生战争的话，美国可能没有办法及时的把这些军队人员还有一些物资送到台湾。所以呢，台湾任何所需要的军备还有武器，都是必须要在战争爆发之前就先送到台湾。那我知道您在这方面有许多的经验，您也曾在这个国防部任职。那不知道关于这方面您有什么样的意见？可以如何加速这个军备的这个输送？而且尤其我们现在看到这个之前军售交付其实有这个延误延迟的状况，这是因为乌克兰的关系。那不知道您有什么样的看法？
So I wasn't a participant, nor do I believe Mr. Blumenthal was a participant in this particular set of war games, and it really was an iterated effort, 24 different plays through the scenario. But from what I've read, I have a couple of views I'd be happy to share.
所以呢，那我本人还有这个蒲大年资深研究员，我们都有参与这个 CSIS 他们的战争兵推的这个过程哦。他们有24次的兵推，那我也读了一些相关的报道，那我有一些看法想要跟各位分享。
Certainly, it underscores the high cost for all parties. Should we fail in our deterrence efforts, and there be actual conflict. Even if we prevail, it is costly for all parties, and therefore it should underscore our current efforts to bolster deterrence.
所以，那其中一个结论就是，如果台海真的爆发战争的话，对所有参与的人员都是损失非常惨重的。所以，就是如果嚇阻失败，真的爆发这个冲突的话，就算胜利也是惨胜的方式。所以我们真的必须要做足准备，做这个嚇阻的方式。
Secondly, it proves that Taiwan is defendable and that we shouldn't have a defeatist attitude. We shouldn't expect that this is such a difficult task, that there aren't things that we can't do to affect the outcome. So even though obviously the game showed that conflict would be costly, it does show that there are ways to prevail, and that should give us at least some hope and be less defeatist that we hear from time to time in some quarters.
所以呢， 这个兵推的结论其实是台湾是可以防卫的，所以我们不应该有自我先放弃的这个心态。所以虽然说有非常多的困难，但是呢，我们必须要有这个希望，因为我们即使是这个损失非常惨重，我们从兵推的过程中也看到其实是有办法可以取得胜利的，所以我们不应该先自我放弃。
And third, it does offer some insights on the kinds of things we should do now to prepare to be optimally positioned, including for deployment of ammunition supplies, Taiwan's preparation for resilience in terms of energy, in terms of food, and yes, this issue of resupply in a contested environment. Armed with this knowledge, we should be doing the kind of planning to keep sea lines of communication open, to have corridors for resupply. These games are helpful to inform future planning and future actions. So as difficult as it may be, I don't think it's impossible, and we should be thinking about how to do this in a contested environment, given what we know of the results of not only this effort, but a lot of other data through wargaming and through observing PLA training and activities over a long period of time. So this is something we should be working on now.
所以呢，那我们另外一个结论就是我们应该现在就先做好万全的准备，尤其是在这个物资的输送、还有弹药的囤储，还有这个建立台湾在能源以及食物、粮食方面的韧性这些我们都希望台湾跟美国有非常畅通的管道，可以进行相关的沟通以及补给的这个行为哦。所以我们这些兵推的结果，其实让我们有更多的资讯、更多的资讯跟知识，可以进行一些提前的计划，还有未来采取行动的这个依据哦。所以我们看到这个兵推的结果，让我们知道要取得胜利其实不是不可能的。虽然它的环境可能条件非常困难，但是我们有这些资讯，有这些我们过去这个观察解放军的行动已经很久了，所以利用这些资讯，我们现在就可以做足非常万全的准备。
Thank you, Randy. Inviting Dan. Yes?
Sure. The other part of the game that we have to underscore and is critical to get into the mindset of Xi Jinping and his lieutenants is how costly such a conflict would be for China. And China would be taking on not just Taiwan, but be taking on the United States and its allies. And that would be extremely difficult for China to do. It would come at very high cost. And we have to keep underscoring as a part of deterrence just how costly it is and again, to prevent this from happening in the first place.
所以另一方面呢，我们也必须要去想一想，就是习近平他目前的这个想法是怎么样的。我们必须要不断的重申，就是如果中国真的采取这个攻击或是侵略的行为，其实是需要付出非常大的代价的，因为它不只是面对台湾，而是面对台湾以及美国以及美国所有的盟友。所以对中国来说，这真的是非常困难的一件事情，也必须要付出高昂的代价。所以我们如果可以重申这一点的话，就可以进行嚇阻来阻止这样的事情发生。
U.S. policy should be to underscore to China how difficult it will be, how costly it will be, how much of a long-term setback it will be for China, and again to insist that China's differences with Taiwan be settled at the negotiating table. That's what our policy should be: peaceful resolution to the dispute between both sides of the strait. Not war, not trying to change the status quo through force.
所以我们美国这边的政策应该是要重申告诉中国，如果采取行动的话，会有多么的困难，付出多高昂的代价，而且他们的国力会因此而倒退好几年哦。所以我们必须要让中国知道，如果和台湾这边有任何不同的看法，任何的歧见，都是应该透过沟通协商来讨论，应该以和平的方式来解决台湾和中国之间的一些问题，而且不应该用武力来改变台海目前的现状。
Thank you very much. Okay, we take next question. Samson, Director Bloomberg.
Hi, Samson Ellis from Bloomberg. Other US Track 2 delegations that have visited Taiwan over the past 6 months since Pelosi's visit have noted a greatly increased urgency in the requests/demands from Taiwan, including the occasional pounding of tables for systems that Taiwan has ordered already several years ago and have not yet been delivered, obviously Stingers being the obvious example there. Have you also seen that sense of urgency in your discussions on this trip, and is that a message you're going to take back to the US that Taiwan needs these weapons soon?
Thank you. We allow translation for the question. Thank you, Sophie.
所以我的问题是我们最近这6个月以来，就是裴洛西议长访台之后这6个月，我们看到来自美国的许多的访团呢，他们都注意到台湾这边有一种紧迫性，就是台湾对于跟美国购买的这些武器，目前都迟迟还没交付，而且可能是好几年前就已经购买的武器还没交付这边有一种更紧急的感觉。那不知道您这一次访问的时候有没有感受到同样的紧迫性？那您是否回到美国的时候会传达这样的讯息，就是台湾需要这些武器军备，而且是现在就需要？
Thank you. Inviting then.
Thank you very much. Yes, the short answer is yes. There is a sense of urgency here. President Tsai and her team are very focused on defense reform, on getting prepared, on civil resiliency, on getting the weapons in their hands that they need. But even more so, I think what we're going to come away with is that Taiwan faces threats every day that are below the threshold of a full invasion. This thing that President Tsai has mentioned, the cognitive campaign, the psychological campaign, the constant presence of the PLA now for a while in China's AIDs, other attempts to manipulate the Taiwanese public to try to convince them there's no hope. These sorts of things are a day-to-day struggle. And I think we really need to get that across to Washington, that we have to address this coercive campaign, this cognitive campaign, this psychological campaign, at the same time as we prepare for a possible escalation over time to an invasion.
Very true. Thank you. Translation, Sophie.
所以简短来说，我的答案是是的。我们这一次访台确实有感受到这样的紧迫性。那我们和蔡总统还有其团队在讨论的时候，我们也看到台湾正在进行许多这个军事方面的改革，还有动员这个公民的防卫，还有取得相关所需要的武器哦。那所以，但是我们这一次回到华府，想要传达的讯息，主要是台湾其实每一天都在遭受一些威胁。那这些威胁可能不是军事上的这个实际的攻击，而是一些像心理战，或是这个解放军持续的这些灰色地带的行为，还有就是试图去分化我们台湾的社会大众，让他们觉得好像未来没有希望。这才是我们这一次希望可以回到华府跟他们表明的，就是台湾其实每一天都面临这样的威胁，所以我们在准备迎接就是可能的军事冲突之外，我们也必须要想办法来因应这样的行为。
Agree in full.
Great. Excellent. We take next question. More question? Chris, New York Times.
Thanks very much. Chris Buckley from the New York Times. A couple of questions, both for Mr. Shriver and Mr. Blumenthal. First of all, you mentioned an uptick in PLA activity recently. I'm wondering, particularly in the light of your conversations in Taiwan, what do you expect from the PLA in the coming 12 months leading up to the Taiwanese election? What do you expect from the Chinese military in terms of perhaps signaling or intimidation, and what would your thoughts be on the appropriate response from Taiwan and the United States? And a second question, particularly coming from Washington, we now have a new, very finely balanced Congress in place. I'm wondering if you could share your thoughts on how that may affect Washington handling of Taiwan and also China as well. And just finally, could you just tell us who you've been meeting during this visit as well?
Thank you. We allow translation for these questions.
那我主要有3个简短的问题哦。那第一个就是您刚有提到解放军的活动不断的增加对台湾的压力。那不知道在这一次访台的相关讨论之中，你们得到的结论是，你们期待 就是或预期未来就是2024总统大选之前的这一年当中，你们预期中国解放军会有什么样的传达什么样的讯号，或是他们会有什么样的活动？那台湾和美国这边应该要做什么样的回应呢？那第二点就是我们现在看到美国已经选出了新的这个议会的国会的成员，那这个两派之间是更加的平衡，那不知道这会如何影响华府在处理台湾和中国议题的一些方向，还有这个方针呢？那最后一个问题，我想要了解一下，此次访团来到台湾，大概有跟哪一些政府官员或是单位来会面呢？
Thank you, Chris. We've been very well received here. We've had the honor of meeting the President, the Vice President, the Secretary General of the National Security Council, the Vice Minister of Defense. We've met with MOEA, the Minister, and so I'm probably leaving out one or two, but it's been an excellent reception, and the discussions have been very rich. In terms of PLA activity, I think these kinds of activities can have several purposes, one of which is the political signaling and trying to affect the mood and optimism and attitude of people on Taiwan. And with regard to the upcoming election, I think we'd anticipate more of the same. I can pause.
所以我们这一次来到台湾，真的受到非常温暖的接待哦。我们见了蔡总统、赖副总统，还有国安会的顾秘书长，还有这个国防部的副部长，还有经济部的王部长。我可能漏掉了一些，但是我们这一次真的进行了非常多，让我们收获非常多的讨论。那再来就是解放军的活动，他们可能有很多种目的。那其中一种可能就是一种政治上的信号哦，就是来影响台湾社会大众的这个总体的士气，或是让他们对未来没有希望。像我刚刚提到的这些做法哦。那如果是讲到这个对2024总统大选之前的这段时间，我认为是大部分都是相同的这个状况哦。
They can also have, of course, military and operational purposes, training for the PLA, testing the response and reaction from Taiwan and Taiwan supporters. Those aren't mutually exclusive. They can both be objectives that are carried at the same time.
那可能也有一些军事上的意涵，就是去训练解放军的军队，还有再来就是测试台湾这边的反应，还有台湾的支持者的反应。那这些目的其实是可以同时进行的。
And I think in both regards, the appropriate response is for us to think about setting new normals, for us to think about not only responding, but showing over time that there is cost imposed on the PLA and on the CCP for this kind of coercion. So supporting Taiwan, trying to provide reassurance as Taiwan carries forward with its own election, but also taking, frankly, a page out of the PLA's playbook. When they provoke, we should do things that are incrementally different and beyond what we've done before in ways that strengthen our military relationship and better posture us from a defense perspective. So I don't know what our administration will do or what will be worked out between the U.S. and Taiwan, but that's certainly something I would advocate.
所以呢，那我们这边也不算是做出回应，但是我们应该让这个解放军还有中国共产党去了解到，他们这些行为是有代价的，他们对台湾进行这些胁迫行为是必须要付出代价的。那我们可以做的就是支持台湾，还有提供台湾所需要的一些这个保障哦，就是在接下来总统大选之前的这段时间，我们都必须要持续的支持台湾。那在解放军他们进行这些挑衅的行为的时候，我们可能也可以想想有什么样不同的做法。就是跟过去不同的做法，像是我们可以强化台湾跟美国之间军事国防的一些合作。那其实我也不确定美国的行政团队会做出什么样的决定，但是我相信这样的方向是非常好的。
And with respect to the Congress, we'll watch with great interest the new Select Committee on China, Chairman Gallagher, and how he will proceed with this new Select Committee. But the fact of the matter is, the China challenge, the related support for Taiwan has enjoyed bipartisan consensus for a good period of time, and we saw that in the last Congress and the provisions of the Taiwan Policy Act and the many provisions that ended in the NDAA. So even with a change of control in one of the chambers, I think we'll see continuity with respect to the Congress looking for ways to support Taiwan and support our bilateral relationship, including in the defense and military area. So without being able to provide specifics at this time, I do anticipate that this will be an agenda that the Congress will take up, and that there will be further provisions to support Taiwan given the threat that they face, as Mr. Blumenthal said, every day, but the pending threat of a potentially worse scenario, an invasion or attack of Taiwan.
所以那关于美国国会的这一题呢，我们也持续的在关注。那像是国会这次有新的关于中国的这个委员会，我们也非常的关注他们接下来会有什么样的这个决定还有行为哦。那关于中国的挑战，我们也会持续的支持台湾。那我相信这是一个跨党派的共识。我们看到上一任的国会就有这个台湾政策法，还有这个国防授权法案，都是非常支持台湾的。那我相信，因为这是跨党派的共识，接下来这的政策也会有非常高的一致性，我们会持续的支持台湾台美关系，而且是更加强我们国防军事相关的合作。那我可能现在没有办法给各位太多的细节，但是我相信国会会持续的朝这个方向前进，就是更加的支持台湾，因为台湾每天都面对像刚才我的同事说的这些威胁，而且台湾也必须要准备迎接可能更糟的一些状况，像是中国的侵略等等。
I just would add one thing. We know it's coming, more coercion, more isolation, more messaging to Taiwan that it's hopeless, more messaging that the United States isn't a reliable ally, all the kinds of disinformation that Taiwan has to deal with on a daily basis. So we need right now a counter-coercive campaign in conjunction with Taiwan, and that has some military elements that Mr. Shriver described, but it also has diplomatic and informational elements that we have to work on together. We have to undermine this notion that the United States is not a reliable partner to Taiwan over the long term, and we have to just give the Taiwanese hope. That's the center of gravity of these Chinese campaigns of isolation, of trying to blame Taiwan democracy somehow for being provocative, when the truth, as we all know, is it's China that's provoking. It's China that's trying to affect the outcome of a democratic election. So a coercive campaign has to be met with a counter-coercive, counter-isolation campaign, and we have to plan that and work on that together with Taiwan.
Thank you.
所以呢，我想要补充一点，就是关于中国持续的对台湾的胁迫，还有试图去孤立台湾，还有试图在台湾传达一些假讯息，就是台湾已经没有希望了，或是台湾不能认为美国是一个可靠的伙伴，这些假讯息都是台湾人每天都在面对的。那关于这些心理战或是假讯息的部分，我们也必须要想办法来因应，而且是以台湾和美国合作的方式来因应。那这个合作的方式，除了像我刚刚同事说的一些军事上的元素，还有外交，还有情资相关的这个元素哦，我们不能让中国持续的传达这些美国不可靠啊，台湾没有希望了这些讯息。那这是我们的这个反台湾遭受孤立的这个行动的一个核心哦。因为中国不断的在责怪台湾的民主是对他们有挑衅意味的，但是我们都知道事实是中国他们才是希望可以去干预台湾这个自由而且公正的一个选举，所以我们必须要想办法做出这种反孤立台湾的一些行动，而且是必须要台湾和美国一起合作。
Thank you. We just want to move the next question. Do you have any other remaining questions? Yes, no? Okay, yes. 民视来，民视玉年。Formosa TV.
我想请问一下，就是 CSIS 的兵推结果认为就是中国会惨输，而且可能还会失去政权。可是呢，中国的军事专栏分析，这兵推的结果是没有意义的，因为美国的目的是要卖台湾武器。那想请问一下，美国这边怎么看？
Any translation for the question?
So my question is about the CSIS war games. The conclusion showed that China would be defeated and also the CCP would lose its power. But Chinese media has shown that they have stated that these war games are have no meaning because the U.S.'s purpose is to sell Taiwan weapons. That is their only and sole purpose. What do you think about this opinion?
Well, I disagree. I think the war games that CSIS conducted, but that others have conducted at classified, unclassified levels, all show that Taiwan faces a serious threat, and whether the particular game shows Taiwan surviving and prevailing in its continued existence or a PLA victory, in every regard, Taiwan is, in each of these games, Taiwan is better off when it's better equipped, when it's better trained, when it's better aligned with the United States in our response, when other countries participate, when we broaden the problem. So Taiwan's preparation in terms of defense, which includes arms sales, are a part of that. Defense industry is really only able to do this when allowed to by the U.S. government, when there's agreement between the U.S. and Taiwan. And these are requests that we are meeting from Taiwan based on requirements identified not only in these games, but here in Taiwan through the process of running simulations and identifying requirements. So these are government-to-government agreements. This is nothing being forced on anybody. They're, in fact, desperately needed capabilities given everything we've learned.
So, 我不同意这样的看法。我认为这个智库他们进行的兵推，还有一些其他机构他们进行的机密或非机密的兵推，他们都显示出台湾正遭受非常严重、非常重大的威胁。那这个研究结果就是显示，台湾如果能胜利，或是可能中国解放军他们能胜利，无论如何，就是台湾都必须要有更多的这个军备，需要更多的训练，必须要更与美国还有其他盟友就是有一致的目标，更良好的沟通，和其他国家也进行更好的合作。那其中要这么做，台湾就必须要有更好的准备。那准备的方面可能就跟国防有关，那可能也就跟军售有关，所以这都是环环相扣的。那我们美国的这个国防产业呢，我们要卖这个军售给台湾的话，也必须要是美国的政府跟台湾的政府之间有先协议好才可以进行的。那我们这些军售都是因为这些台湾的方面的要求，或是这些兵推的结果，让台湾的这方面有这样的需求，所以其实都是政府跟政府之间有良好的协议、良好的沟通，并不是有任何胁迫台湾或是逼迫台湾购买任何军备，这都是台湾所需要做的一些准备。
I just want to take the opportunity and thank you to swat away Chinese propaganda and disinformation campaigns. The United States has a law, as you know, the Taiwan Relations Act, which requires, it's not a question of different politicians coming in with different policy. It's a legal requirement to help Taiwan defend itself and protect against coercion. That's the language of the law. But the United States would be very encouraging of other countries to sell weapons to Taiwan as well. China just browbeats and bullies countries to not do so. The United States encourages Taiwan's defense industry. The bottom line is the United States wants Taiwan to be well equipped, as Mr. Shriver said. And that equipment can come from anywhere. But we shouldn't just focus on equipment. We should focus on training with Taiwan, getting Taiwan ready for a host of different scenarios, bringing it out of its isolation, and these sorts of things as well.
Thank you. In translation.
所以非常谢谢你给我这个机会，可以去反对这个中国媒体所提供的假讯息哦。那我们美国军售给台湾是有法源依据的，像是这个《台湾关系法》都是写在明文写在法律里面的，所以这并不是任何就是政府他们自己的决定，这是有法源依据的，就是要让台湾有办法可以防卫自己。那美国也非常鼓励其他国家就是军售给台湾，我们也非常鼓励台湾发展自己的国防产业。我们最终的目标就是希望台湾可以做足准备，有台湾所需要的一些军备。那这些军备从哪里来？其实我们并没有那么在意，其实都可以。所以除了军备之外，我们也非常重视台湾这边军事人员的训练，还有如何让台湾可以对抗这个心理战，还有假讯息，这些都是非常重要的。
Okay, I'm conscious of the time, so maybe last questions if there's any. 还有没有最后的问题？来小乔 Joe. Okay, anybody else? Just one? Yeah, 就小乔一题。好 ，So will be Joe. Yeah, CNA.
It's me again, sorry. In the CSIS simulation thing, that there's the local media has said that there's one factor that it hasn't been taken into consideration is that there's Chinese spies in Taiwan that could, and some local that is supporting Chinese regime. So, what do you think this kind of factors should be taken into consideration?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
It didn't take into the factor that there are Chinese spies here, that they're supporting the Chinese regime, that once they attack Taiwan, they will help to help them succeed. So do you think that part of it is something we should take into consideration too? Thanks.
Thank you. Translation for the question. Yes.
好的，我的问题也是跟智库的这个兵推有关系的，就是我们当地的一些媒体，他们说，其实这个兵推没有考量到其中一个因素，就是台湾这边可能有中国的间谍，这些间谍他们可能会在如果中国去入侵台湾的时候，他们会协助中国这边胜利。那不知道这样的因素是否也应该列入考量，是否没有考量到这部分？
Okay. So before I invite Randy to respond, 我就want to check. Emily want to do? 逸轩有想问问题吗 ？Yeah, since that was her question.
我用中文。
好，可以。
喂，那个我们最近把恢复1年的兵役嘛，然后那个之前这个薛瑞福先生有说他期待看到更多军事合作改革，想要知道说，因为关于1年的这个恢复啊，有些人说其实重点不是时间长短，而是训练的内容。不晓得他和我们官方讨论的时候有没有类似这样的观点？
We need translation for the question.
So my question is about Taiwan extending conscription from 4 months to 1 year. So Chairman Shriver, I know that you have said that Taiwan and the U.S. needs more cooperation to conduct military reform. And some people say that in terms of conscription, the point is not the time or length of conscription. The point is the content of training and intensity of training. I don't know if during your discussions with officials here in Taiwan, you have touched upon this topic, and what is your opinion about this?
We have 2 questions already. Okay, just want to double check, Moni Zhongshi, you don't have a question, right? Or no? Okay. So we're inviting Randy and Dan to respond at their will.
On the first question, let me take that one and then pass it on to Mr. Shriver. So, unfortunately, the Chinese CCP policy, through the use of the Ministry of State Security and other political influence organizations, political warfare organizations, that's a big part of their strategy, not just in Taiwan. Obviously, Taiwan is vulnerable for obvious reasons, but to create these kinds of agents of influence and fifth columns throughout all of the democratic nations. And again, it's something else we can work together to identify, to help go after, to help prosecute cases. And much more of this needs to be done, not just in Taiwan, in the United States, in Japan, throughout Europe. We're just all waking up to this threat of agents of influence, whether it is to influence our politics or to work, as you say, with the PLA in case of more extreme scenarios. So we do have a lot of work to do as we're all waking up to this multifaceted threat that the CCP poses to the integrity of democracies, and we need better answers, and we need them pretty fast. Thank you.
Thank you. Translations.
所以非常遗憾的，中共这个做法还有行为，其实不只是在台湾他们在许多的其他的民主国家，其实也都有这些间谍的这个行动哦。那我们台湾跟美国之间可以合作的，就是想办法来辨识出这些间谍，还有起诉，还有进行相关的合作，像是台湾跟美国，还有甚至是日本跟欧洲国家 都是，因为我们现在都越来越意识到有这样的威胁，那这些间谍可能会影响到我们的政治啊，或是就是如果有更极端的状况，就是中国如果入侵台湾的话，他们可能还会进行这个协力的角色哦。所以我们有非常多的工作要做，因为现在中国对于民主国家是有多面向的这个威胁，所以也带来非常多的挑战，我们必须要尽快的想到解决办法。
The issue of training has been much discussed during our visit. We believe, as an institute, that increased training could be a key enabler to a more effective fighting force in Taiwan. We've seen elsewhere, Ukraine, for example, where the ability to train with NATO, Western countries, United States, has been a differentiator on the battlefield in favor of the Ukrainians. So it's something we'd like to see increased. But of course, these two issues are related. If you're only serving for 3 months, there's only so much time you can do to train. So extending the conscription for a year does give more opportunities for that interaction and that training. So these are sovereign decisions, obviously, on how to construct the force and how long a conscripted period would be, but having made the decision, we applaud it because we think there's opportunities to have a much better trained force, which then can help with a better trained reserve force or even civil society after that longer period of military training. So we support it, and I think it's a good thing.
Thank you, Randy.
所以我们这次访台，其实在这个军队训练的方面有许多的讨论哦。那我们2049计划研究所，我们也非常支持，可以提升训练的品质，还有这个强度哦，因为这样可以确保台湾有更有效还有强大的军力。那我们也看到，像是乌克兰，他们也有很多机会可以像是跟北约、还有西方国家、还有美国进行训练的这个行动哦。那这是在他们进行战争的时候，也是非常大的帮助。那其实这两个是环环相扣的，因为如果你的义务役只有3个月的时间，其实你能进行的训练也是有限的，因为时间实在太短了。如果延长到1年的话，其实就有更多的机会可以进行更多强度更高的这些训练。那这是每个国家必须自己做的决定，就是义务役的长度多长啊，或是内容如何，这都是每个国家可以自己做的决定。但是我们2049计划研究所是非常支持这样的决定，因为我们认为这带来更多的机会，可以去强化台湾的不管是军队还是后备军力，还有这个公民防卫的这些构想，我们认为是非常好的，也予以支持。
Thank you. If there's no any other question, I believe so I just would like to highlight, our sincere appreciation, for the visit, the presence, and the assistance of Randy Schreiber, for his leadership. He supported Taiwan over the years. He is not only very well known Taiwan. I think he visited like 80 times to Taiwan in the past 20, 30 years. We've seen he supported Taiwan before and after as the former U.S. Secretary of Defense. He has always been long-standing in front of Taiwan. We really, really appreciate that. It's wonderful seeing you. Thank you for bringing your institute, your great colleague with us. It's really great to have you back to Taiwan. Also to thank Dan, Mr. Blumenthal. He has always also long-standing friend of Taiwan, visited Taiwan like 60 times as well during the past 20, 30 years. So you know that they both maybe know Taiwan better than we do. And so we're really thrilled to have you back. Thank you so much. And so may Taiwan also be called your second home. And also thank you for each one of you for participating. And I think it has been a good discussion, very informative, very well in depth, and they really share with us very frankly and very thoughtfully, their thoughts. So thank you. 非常谢谢大家参加今天记者会。And as part of tradition, I know, we're taking like a group picture. 我们就大合照，好不好？就大家，我们先合照一张，3个人一起 ，3 of us first on the stage, and then we inviting our colleagues joining us on the second photo. Yes.
Can I just quickly?
Oh yes, yeah. Sorry.
Very quickly, just wanted
yes.
to thank you, Madam Ambassador, for hosting this engagement with the press, and thank the Foreign Ministry. We had a wonderful discussion with Foreign Minister Wu, in addition to the other engagements I mentioned earlier. And just to end where we started, it's great to refresh our relationships and understand the current state of play but this is all for the purposes of us being able to be better advocates for the U.S.-Taiwan relationship when we return home. And so far, I think mission almost accomplished. Got a couple more days, but thank you very much.
Wait, translation for this word.
所以真的非常谢谢我们欧发言人主持今天的记者会，也非常感谢外交部。我们昨天和吴部长也有非常好的讨论。像我先前所提到的，我们来到台湾就是希望可以重启这些对话、这些讨论，所以真的可以去了解台湾现在的现况是非常好的。因为这样我们回到华府的时候，就可以为台湾还有台美关系发声，这都是非常好的。那我们的行程还有几天的时间，但是我们任务应该是快要圆满达成了，所以真的非常高兴这一次可以来到台湾。
Then we'll be getting our colleagues, right? Also from the institute, and also the North American colleagues, right? Yeah, please join us on the stage. Come on. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
And our excellent interpreter.
Yes, that is wonderful. Yes, our colleague here. Yes. Okay. 来起来一下。Okay, it's okay? Okay 吗？对，好，谢谢大家。Thank you so much. Thank you. 谢谢，谢谢，谢谢。
Okay.